have heard about Barbie, but have you heard about Black Barbie? On today's episode of That's Lit with me, Shazzy D, I'm speaking with Lagueria Davis, the director of Black Barbie, a documentary. It tells the story of the first Black Barbie and the incredible women who helped create it. Lagueria, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Sharon. I'm super excited to chat with you.
I've seen the movie, I absolutely enjoyed it, but it's a very personal story for you. Um, how did you feel when you first found out that your aunt was involved in the creation of Black Barbie?
I was struck, like, so fascinated by it. I was so surprised, listening to her, and she's like, I was on that first Barbie line in 1959, and I was like, wait, what? Like, you're living history right now. Like, you're telling me about, and she's like, yeah. And I was like, why not make a Barbie that looks like me? Why not make a black Barbie? And I was like, oh my goodness. You know, I'm a filmmaker, right? And she didn't truly understand what that meant. And so I listened to her story, and then I went off to do just a little bit of research to kind of get a better understanding of Black Barbie's story and some of the key players in that story. And I came back to her and I was like, Aunt May, I want to make a documentary about your life. And she's like, what? I'm a peon. I'm a nobody. What are you talking about? And so, that's how Black Barbie, a documentary, was born.
So it was almost immediately after you decided, oh, I'm gonna make a documentary. Is that kind of how the process went?
Yeah, like, I mean, once I sat down to do the research and I saw, the 21-year gap and, learned about Kitty Black Perkins, I just heard my aunt's story from her mouth, learned about Stacy McBride Irby, who protege of Kitty. Like, listening to that, and being fascinated to learn about Black Barbie to begin with. Like, I didn't even know about Black Barbie. To learn about these amazing women in the space, you know, and then to also, I come to it with, I didn't play with dolls and I didn't like dolls. And so I'm coming into it just skeptical to begin with and not having a real sense of understanding. And once I learned about Black Barbie kind of taking the 21 years, I found myself relating to this doll because I was like, oh my gosh, this is a piece of plastic navigating a white landscape, and the struggle is real for a piece of plastic, you know, let alone can you just imagine what the struggle is like for an actual living, breathing, like person, a black woman. And so I was relating to this doll so hard that I was just like, oh my gosh, what is my world right now? And I knew I had to tell a story after that.
Yeah. And is it true that it took something like 12 years to make the film?
Yeah, like it took 12 years. We're actually in year 13, since we've not released it yet. But we received, we're able to get distribution with Netflix and Shondaland. So I'm actually in the process of the story that keeps giving. We're opening the film back up, and it's one of those things where will it ever be done? Like on one hand, it's like this amazing journey and a blessing to be in a position to go in and really kind of, fine tune a few things under the tutelage and guidance of Shondaland, Shonda Rhimes and Betsy Beers you know, and so I'm, extremely grateful for that opportunity. And then, since it's already been such an arduous 12-year journey with it. It feels also like ripping a band-aid off something that I'd spent the year, coming to terms with. Like, Black Barbie, a documentary is finally done. I can breathe. She's out and she's gonna soar, and people will know her story and know about my aunt, Beulah Mae Mitchell, and Kitty Black Perkins, and Stacey McBride Irby, and her legacy will live on in our film. All of these things. And it's like, screw, no. Let's continue the process. So, yes, 10 years of, research and development and fundraising, and then, 2 years of getting once we got the funding, 2 years almost to the date, we received the funding April 2021 and premiered at South by Southwest in Texas in March of 2023. And here we are now. I'll be filming again some new interviews for the film. So, like I said, the journey continues, and we're looking into adding this final years to the process of the timeline. So it'll be somewhat of a 13-year journey to bring her to a global audience with our partners, Netflix and Shondaland. So it's great.
How exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, Shonda Rhimes, like,
Yeah.
to me, she is just
Yeah.
like incredible. All the stuff she makes.
I
And to,
have to watch. It's a no-brainer.
yeah, yeah,
I see her name and I'm like, and when does that come out so I can watch it?
100% same here. I mean, look, Queen Charlotte for me was like, oh my gosh, Scandal. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, it's been handled. Let's do this. Like Papa Pope, Olivia Pope, like we here for it, always and forever.
This kind of process that you've been through, I mean, year 13 now, was there anything that kind of surprised you over the time that you've been kind of creating the documentary?
Yeah, I think the journey has been, magical and I think full of surprises, to be honest. Where do I even start? You think you have an idea, and I think I was surprised by how Black Barbie turned into like a two-word pitch. I found it easier to get into a lot of different rooms with the project, but was still, faced with certain obstacles of its relevancy and importance as far as the story that I wanted to tell about celebrating these Black women and, what it means to navigate, what it means, feels like, looks like to navigate white spaces as a Black woman and have, the people and the women in the film kind of speak to what that, looks like and what's at stake. And, we look to the children in the third act. And, there are just a lot of things that people within the rooms that I was, pitching this project couldn't truly understand why I would want to focus on this, or how it even connected together. They're like, oh, you want to play with the dolls? And I'm like, yes. Like, how can you make a movie about Black Barbie and not like that's gonna be so fun. The first time in my like life, I'm actually want to play with the dolls. Um, and so, let's do that. And this is what that could potentially look like and play like in the film. And the reimagining of the doll test, if you will. They're like, what do you mean you want to like talk to the kids? And I'm like, well, the kids of today, they're playing with Barbie still, I think. Let's figure out what that looks like. And that makes sense to me as well. So, the things that made sense to me as particular story points didn't necessarily always make sense to the people opposite the table of me. Um, and so I found that very, I don't know why I was surprised, but I did find sometimes navigating those spaces not only challenging but surprising as well. And just as surprising as it was to distribute it, like I'm not asking you for like money to make it. We've made it. It's doing well. Um, serendipitously, we're in the year of Barbie. Couldn't have planned that. This is a magical universe thing that has been upon, the project, giving it a different sort of relevancy and a part of a larger conversation. But it was still, quite challenging to find that space in which to bring it to a global audience.
You've touched on it already, but talking about dolls and how I guess at the start of the film you really talk about how, okay, you weren't really into dolls. And I'll be honest, I was more of a teddy bear person myself, so I can
Oh,
understand. But has your opinion changed on dolls?
a little bit, yeah. I think, I always think in terms of someone who I had watching the film, a longer version of the film, and they were like, hate is such a strong word. And I'm like, I know it is, but that's how I feel in my heart about dolls. I'm not a fan. And, during that process, I was like, this is interesting. Like, in an effort to connect with my aunt, um, I set out to understand because I do think, hate is a strong word. And from, what I've picked up on the sense of where hate can come from is a lack of understanding, you know, not engaging with people from cultures and beliefs that are different from you. And so I set out to understand, to really kind of like unpack why, you know, I felt this way. And in doing so, getting an opportunity to really connect with my aunt, to kind of learn, what these black dolls meant for her. And through that understanding, I, realized that women of a certain age, like my aunt's age, they collect black dolls. It stems from a lack of not having them to play with when they were younger. And this is something that, my generation, with having the options, even though, as our film points out, it wasn't always marketed or easy to find these options. We had them, though. Something that my generation would take for granted, right? Um, and so, there were things as watch the film and see my character journey, that I had to recognize. It's funny because I knew that I didn't like baby dolls for what they told me I should be as a woman. Like, I felt it again, and I think this is a nice thing that we have going in our film where you have adults talking about how they felt as kids that they just couldn't put into words or articulate. Um, but I always found it so interesting that the toys that were given to me as a young girl in the way of vacuums and baby dolls and cooking sets and really pointed towards this domestic situation that I kind of rejected as a little girl. I was just like, I don't want this. Why should this be what I want just because I'm a girl and I have a little brother and I would see his toys and Transformers and remote control cars and which I thought were super cool. I was like, these toys do something. And it didn't feel like it was telling, even though now I understand that it was definitely messaging behind those toys. Um, as a little kid, I didn't feel like it was trying to paint a little boy in a corner that felt very submissive, and you know what I'm saying? So,
Mm, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so, um, I think at the end of the film, I'm like, I thought I hated dolls also because I was a tomboy. Um, and, I realized that it goes deeper than that. And it's due to a lot of the things that, you know, the voices in the film speak to is not feeling seen or heard. For you, you feeling seen and heard as a girl who should want these things, or as a black woman who, but not something that authentically speaks to what who you are as a person and what you gravitate towards and your diversity of thought and what you bring to the table outside of checking the boxes of being a black woman, and I'm also queer. So, yeah. So
I guess
yeah.
ties nicely into why representation is so important. I feel like we have to keep saying this over and over, and some people may not fully grasp why. And I think this film really has such a good way of exploring that through dolls and especially through Black Barbie as well.
Yeah, it is. I think, what our film really sets out to kind of do outside of what it means and feels like and looks like to navigate white spaces is also how um, being in the space outside of checking that box of, oh, we have a black person, or we have a black woman, um, and actually leaning into what it is that we can bring to the table, like we see with my aunt who kind of paved the way for, the Kitty Black Perkins to come in and be able to do what she's able to do in that space. Um, and her being able to, as she says in the film, she saw a need for little black girls to have something, and she wanted to, I feel like she imbued Black Barbie, you know, um, in a very intentional way, that speaks to the black culture in a way that some of these other, quote unquote, one, fashion dolls that came before Black Barbie who were not Barbies, um, and then the Black Barbies that came after Black Barbie because Black Barbie opened that door for all of Mattel's fashion dolls to be called Barbie, you know. Um, yeah, it's something about when you see Black Barbie, and her, as Kitty says, having her own identity that's not tied into that of the Barbie identity. Um, so yeah, yeah, giving her bold colors and bold jewelry. That's the kind of intentional way in which Kitty was moving in that space, that went beyond her being a black woman, but having her ideas turned into a reality. And so I often say that Black Barbie herself, the doll, is validation for my aunt and Kitty and Stacy. Validation of being seen and heard in a space where oftentimes, as Ashley Blaine Featherson Jenkins says in the film, oftentimes we're silenced, you know? We're told what our stories are, or our stories are told by people who have no understanding of what it means to navigate these white spaces, as a black person, and also having an understanding that it's not a monolithic black experience. Yeah, so I can go on and on.
No, that's really good. No, you've definitely touched upon what you've got, but yeah, there's lots. Like, I just encourage people, if they haven't seen it, like once it does come out, to go and see it because it's just, I mean, I learned so much I didn't know about Black Barbie, and it just goes deeper than that. Is it true that this is like your first feature film,
Yeah, so this is my first feature documentary.
but you've produced and you've
Yeah.
written?
So this is my first, I would say, like major, to me, this feels like a major motion picture type experience. Because even though I still wore a lot of different hats, there was some form of monetary compensation. I wasn't necessarily always out of pocket for expenses and stuff like that. I think anyone listening to this who's an independent filmmaker may have an idea of what I'm talking about. But yes, I wrote and directed a feature film right out of college that is, in the true indie spirit of things. I always talk about in terms of, they call it like a shoestring budget as far as like low budgets go. And I'm like, we didn't have shoestrings. We were rocking some flip flops. So we had like, a flip flop budget, and it was great. 1 in 3, about domestic violence. I love to explore um, social issues as it relates to, we have a Black woman protagonist at the center of the story. And so, yes, this will be my second feature, my first documentary. It was hard. It's
But you did
definitely
it. You did
different
it.
storytelling. Yeah, it's definitely different storytelling.
Yeah. Do you have
Yes.
a favorite
Mhm.
part of the filmmaking process?
Oh, I love the creative doing of it. The business of it really kind of just sometimes can suck the life out of the creative process. But I think for me, there are just different phases of it, of taking it out of the scheduling and actually moving into production and sitting down with the people I'm in conversation with in the film. And, I've said making this film and listening to, um, like Ashley Blaine, Gabby Sidibe, Monica, Isis, Doo Wop, like the people in our film, hearing their stories, my aunt, Kitty, inspired me to really want to move in a way that felt intentional for our film, if that makes any sense. So I was getting inspiration from them and hearing how they were navigating in those spaces, and um, just trying to make them feel as seen and heard as possible in our film. So yeah, I feel like that was a one of the favorite parts. And then of course, I feel like once we move out of production and we start to work in the edit space, it's that's super fun. And we had a super fun element to this with working with the dolls, which was so interesting. We went with more of a puppet animation. That's what our little budget could really afford and allow for, which I think is beautifully rendered in our film. And so the people behind that with Funko, and so all of the different little creative elements with our graphics and 9B, working with them, that is what gives me joy. The art of storytelling, the actual storytelling, the doing, being in that, and then when you jump into the business of it, where oftentimes it's within that space you can definitely feel silenced and not and undervalued. Like it, you are reminded how in corporate America the laborer is undervalued in so many different ways. And yeah, yeah, um, that's my least favorite part of filmmaking.
What do you hope audiences, so those who haven't seen the documentary yet, what do you hope they take away from watching the film?
This question is always very interesting to me because I prefer to, talk with people and have them tell me what they took away from it,
Yeah,
instead of imposing,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, anything that I have in mind. But I just hope that they enjoy the journey. I set out to kind of take people on an emotional journey that feels like life. There's highs and lows, and hopefully you'll laugh and you'll cry, and at the end of the story, you feel as if you've maybe learned something. You feel inspired, um, and yeah, I that's what I would say. And hopefully our film points that out to a certain degree, that it is, you're bringing your own experiences into watching the film, and it's subjective. And there's just these little things that I totally love in our film, where in one breath you have Jaleesa Calderon being like, she's a brown girl, she's got some melanin in her skin, and then in another breath you have Gabby Sidibe being like, she's a little light skinned, like, and understanding the nuances between those statements. And one of my favorite cuts in the film is where we're looking at the racism vlog, and we have Shelly being like, oh, I love it, like, little Barbie, she's an ally, I love it. And then we immediately cut to Gabby Sidibe saying, I love it if it works, like, really having an understanding of the varied, like I said earlier, it's not a monolithic, like, Black experience, and celebrating the differences of how we might perceive and see things within this space, and giving voice to that. So, we definitely weren't afraid to have those competing thoughts and ideas within the film, because that is what it means for representation. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Being in the space, being able to authentically say how you feel, and that's what we afforded. Hopefully, I feel. Hopefully, our people in the film would say that, for them to speak their mind.
I have to ask this one question. Did you see
Yeah.
the Barbie movie? And if you did,
Oh yeah,
what did you
I
think?
did. Did you see it? What did
Yes, I
you
did.
think?
Yes, I did. And
Yeah,
look, let me start with my thoughts. I
yeah, yeah.
didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did. I
Yeah, that's
did not
fair.
know where it was going to go because, again, it's that thought of this is going to be about a doll, but a real person. And I was like, I went in with, I'm not sure about this. That was how I went in. Watched it, was like, okay, not that bad.
Yeah. Um, I feel similarly. Like, I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. I wasn't anticipating enjoying, you know, it as much as I actually did, with the understanding of, one, I was so excited to think in terms of being in a creative capacity, and having the resources and the support to really, like, build a world and lift that vision. So I was excited for Greta as a creative person. Um, and then also, having an understanding that no one person or no one film can do and say everything. And, um, you know, as I talk about this and navigate, it just, for me, really hits home how important it is to have other voices in the spaces, in these creative spaces, to tell different stories from different perspectives. And so I do feel like, what we saw was the story that, um, and as an independent filmmaker or just a filmmaker in general, I don't know, I get asked this question all the time, like, why are you the best person to tell this story, right? Which sometimes is just infuriating to me, to constantly be asked that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so, she was the best person to tell that particular story. Like, she is the only person that could tell that story. And it's from her lens and her gaze. And I think, like I said, it just hits home that this is why we need other creatives in the space. And I feel similarly about Black Barbie, only, you know, this gaze, my lens, my perspective, only I could make this movie, Black Barbie. Um, you know? And so here's to being creative and, hopefully moving towards a space where we can see more creatives, BIPOC creatives having similar opportunities to tell their stories.
I'm here for it. I 100% agree with you that we need more BIPOC people just giving their, perspective. And that's what makes, films and art and whatever industry just that much richer. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it.
Lageria, it has been honestly such a pleasure speaking with you today. I'm not sure if you have a release date for
Not yet.
not yet, but it will be on Netflix. And make sure that you tune in, you watch it because this is such a great documentary. I highly recommend it.
I love it. Thank you so much for this platform to talk about our film. And I can't wait for this to drop and for our film to drop. And let's make 2024 lit, right? That's what you're here for, right? This is the lit
Thanks.
podcast.
Oh my God. Perfect.